We're going to be pulling back the curtain and talking about exactly how power moves and how deals get done inside the industry. And now we've got organizations that have their inventory and they're using them as office exclusives, and they're almost weaponizing that exclusive to say that if you are not a member of this company, then you don't have access to these homes. How, if any, talks have been had about this usage of the office exclusive? We're going to be pulling back the curtain and talking about exactly how power moves and how deals get done inside the industry. We are lucky enough to have Mr. Asa Fleming, who's been in those rooms and had those conversations. This is back in New York, back in 70s, 80s. This is just as hip hop is getting started. And young Asa is out, came down from Connecticut, and he's experienced in New York, taking it all in. In the midst of that, he's dreaming. And he's thinking about what his future is going to be like. And, you know, the fashion and the music is all happening. But in the midst of that, you're thinking of what is to come. And you and the family decide that we want to move to North Carolina. And you come to Wilson, North Carolina to finish up high school, and you stay in North Carolina just long enough to graduate from NC State. And then you go back to New York. And a lot of people don't know this, but you go back to New York to start your real estate career with all the hustle and bustle, all of the challenges involved in the city. And you can imagine the competitiveness is a different time now. Jay-Z's got everybody with that new blue Yankee on, and you're back in New York, you're doing the real estate, but that sweet Caroline keeps calling you. So you come to North Carolina, and that's where things just take off.
Right.
It's like you come here, and 2013, RRAR president. 2019, North Carolina state president. Right. And now vice president of the National Association of Realtors. Right. You stay with it, no matter what people said, no matter the people asking you, are they paying you over there? How much they paying you? How are you making money over there? You stay with it. And you exposed to a lot of us that there was two sides to this game. There were two ladders. There was the production side, but there was also the changing the entire industry side and getting involved. And you kept every turn, every step of the way representing homeowners. So help me understand, Asa. What's really going on here? What is the real end game to having both sides of the game covered?
Well, I'll start off by saying thanks for having me again here. This is awesome. But impact. Having a legacy and having impact is the end game. Being able to look back and say, I did something that helped the industry. And what I always say is my clients, my community, and my industry. So you got to remember, when I was in New York as a young kid, I always felt like I knew I wanted to own my own business. I had an entrepreneurial spirit. I was working in New York when I graduated from NC State. And I went back to New York and working at New York Hospital on the east side of Manhattan, merged with Columbia Presbyterian on the west side of Manhattan in the late 90s, around the 2000s. And so I found myself in a room with 78 managers and 50 jobs. Now, luckily, I survived that. But in around 1998, I tried to decide, how am I going to kill my own food? And so I got into real estate in Queens. I had a
Say
company
that
called,
again. How are you going to
how am
kill?
I going to kill my own food that I eat? Because I didn't want to rely on somebody. Because, I really realized that when you are in a room with 78 managers and 50 jobs, everybody's fired and they're going to take the best 50, right? Which I survived it, but man, they were people that were making over $250,000 that lost their job. They had to start over. And, for me, I kind of worked my way up. I got out of college in 94 and I kind of worked my way up, had a couple of jobs before I got to the hospital.
Yeah.
And so, I knew that I wasn't going to, that wasn't the end game for me. And so I got into real estate in Queens, coolest job ever. I worked for All Nations Realty. They had an exclusive right to sell in Ocala, Florida. So I would work at the hospital during the day, take clients down to, Ocala, Florida. Pleasure Island was open at the time. And so we would party all night, have dinner, party on Friday, show them the property on Saturday, party all night at Pleasure Island, right? And then, write them up on Sunday and be back at JFK Sunday night. So during the course of
Wow.
that, I bought a couple lots. Where me and a friend of mine, we went in together and bought a couple of them. And I mean, I get back to North Carolina, and the funny thing is how I got back to North Carolina. Let me talk about that. I'm taking a dollar van or a train into the Jamaica station to take a train into Manhattan every day. And one day, my CFO, he made $1.3 million. Yeah, he was chauffeured in from Long Island every day. He said, "I'm going to pick you up and take you to work." So I said, subway, limo.
Yeah.
I'm in the limo
Yeah,
with this
get
guy,
me.
right? So that ride changed my life because he sat there and he said, "Hey, we want to, what you want to do? You have the business acumen. We want to give you a hospital." I said, "To tell you the truth, it isn't it. I got into real estate and I love it. I really excited when I'm doing it." And he says, "Okay." He kind of saw the fire. I'm thinking he's going to be like, "What? Why would you do real estate?" No. This guy was like, "Well, if you want to get into real estate," and
Wow.
mind you, this is 1999. He said, "Phoenix, Arizona, the Washington, D.C. metro area, or Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina." So, I'm an NC State
Wow.
grad, right? I'm
Wow.
an NC State grad. So I
Yeah.
said, "Well, Phoenix, I get. I've been out there to Scottsdale." I was like, DC area, been out there, got friends, it's growing, Reston area, Upper Virginia, it's growing. But Raleigh, Durham, it's a small town. I think it has one building. I went to college there. He said, "You're too close to the trees to see the forest. You go down there, and in 20 years, you'll be somebody. With your business acumen, you would make a dent. You'll really, it's growing. They've done a very good job with that Research Triangle Park." So I got down here 2001. I'm one of those people that immediately got in because he told me, I used his advice. He said, "When you get down there, get involved with the association. That's where the
Mm.
movers and the shakers of the business learn."
Really?
So I walked into Raleigh Regional Association of Realtors in 2002. I think it was 2002. I got there in 2001, like December-ish, but I didn't really get until 2002. And I said, "I want to be on the government affairs committee." They looked at me like I had two heads. Like, who are you with? Whose campaign are you trying to influence?
Sure.
Why are you want? Nobody want. I mean, it's very rare, right? And so I got involved, with that, and that's where I learned that, I had a couple of mentors. I never forget Elizabeth Allardyce, who said, "If you want to be in real estate, don't just sell real estate. Be in the business of real estate where you can affect your clients, your community, and your industry." And so I got involved. My first chairmanship was of the Government Affairs Committee in 2008. I got on the board in 2010, and by 2013, I was the president. And so it was incredible, I got to see things with government affairs like affecting policy, going down to the, municipality, the city,
Sure.
going down to the county office and talking to those guys, going to the General Assembly and just lobbying for private property rights in our industry and homeowners. We're the only group that advocates for homeowners in the country, in the world, really. And so it was something that was very eye-opening. And everything that I've done up until this point, I've been asked. I never really was like, "I want to be the chair" or "I want to be the president." It's always been like, "We encourage you to, take the next step and do this. Have you ever thought about this?" And I just never said no. I did say no one time when I was going to be the president of the state, but my mother was sick. My mother-in-law was living with me sick. I had to say no, but I said, if it's meant to be and it comes back around, I'll do it. And it came back around, and I ended up being president of the state in 2019. I look back at it now, man. What a ride. What an impact I've had, and how many homeowners and communities have I been a part of that, helping them protect private property rights and home ownership.
No, I honestly believe that your drive to work has to be filled with just communities and areas and development that that you've had a hand. These things would not be here if not for some of the efforts of you people like yourself and others who have gotten together to make sure that certain rights are protected for homeowners, or that
Absolutely.
certain communities see a benefit that they get the return.
Absolutely.
Those are the things I've heard you speak about for a long time. Many of you should know Asa has been the president of our Raleigh Association of Realtors. And I don't know how much you know about this, but when I came to North Carolina and I had the crazy idea that I could help people sell their home, right? I sold 1 million different things for $1 in New Jersey. And now, so I'm like, I want to sell one thing for $1 million. And in the process of that, there was this new, to me, medium, Facebook. And I literally said, these people are on here doing the things that I want to do. I'm going to reach out to them. And so, I reached out to Asa when I first got here. I was a on-site agent for a builder, and they said, you might want to get your real estate license. And I got that. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to get involved. And you were one of the first people that I reached out to on Facebook.
Oh, wow.
And I sent you that message to say, I love what you're doing. I would love to, have lunch with you. And you literally agree. We met over at the what was the building upstairs at the restaurant? Capital
City Club, or no, the Cardinal Club, I think.
The Cardinal Club is the name of it. Yes, that's right.
It's something different now.
Oh my goodness, man. And so that lunch, right? And you really just kind of validated so much to me that the opportunity is here and that this is what you need to do. And you told me exactly kind of what you're telling me the mentor told you. You want to go down to the association and get involved there. That's where the people are going to be. And that's what led to me being on the board. And I all the different times that we've spent together over the years, I still remember probably the biggest impact was you telling me at the Duke Hotel at a big conference that, do you know who's in this room right now?
Right.
I'm like, not really. I don't know these people. Like, I'm new. And you're like, these are all of the heads of their regions for the different, and if you make these relationships, this is how you're going to extend your network. And that day, and after that, I said, you said, so go get those cards. You said, go get their cards and give them your cards and meet those people. And then afterwards, I called my wife, right? I always call my wife. We talk about that. As a realtor, a lot of times, when we're out doing these things and we even surprise ourselves, I'm calling my wife. I'm like, babe, Asa, he's here. And I'm talking to Asa and all these different people. And he told me, and I'm like, yeah, it was great. Everything was wonderful. I'm about to go get in the car right now. I'll be home in a minute, right? And I saw you. I'm like, okay, let me tell Asa bye. And I go talk to you. I'm like, Asa, it was great. I got all the cards. Look at all these cards I got. And you told me, that's good. Now is where the real business is going to take place. Let me show you something. And we walked around the corner in that hotel from the conference room to the little bar area. And the same people that were in there, they were in the three of them were over there in the corner and two were over here. One of them was having a party, and that night was really the beginning of me understanding that it wasn't just about me trying to find someone to buy or sell a home. It was really about getting involved and learning and what that opportunity could do for me. And it taught me that your net worth is only as good as your network, right? Like,
Exactly.
that's what it taught me.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate those times that you took with me, man.
Yeah.
And it led to me being in Washington, D.C. and some of those places just like yourself, man. And so I want to ask you, biggest misconception about leadership that realtors have? What is it that most of us don't understand about being involved in the industry? What is the huge misconception that we have on our side?
I think there's a couple of things when you come to that. For one, I think there's a misperception that it's a good old boys network, right? And it's very difficult to penetrate. And they already have their leaders picked out, and it's friends looking out for friends, cronyism, and that's a misperception, right? The other one is that there's no money in that. I've got to sell as many transactions as I can. I'm only focused on transactions so I can earn a living, and make money. And that's also a misperception because you will make money indirectly by the relationships that you form, when you're meeting people across the country, across the state, in different cities and within your state, different companies within your local area where you are. You start to really have relationships, and it's a lot easier to do business with people when they know that you're committed, you're involved, and you know what you're doing. And so going back to the, hey, it's a good old boys network. I've never been part of a good old boys network. I've always been me. And, one of the things I got involved with was RPAC, which is, the Realtor Political Action Committee, giving money because I felt if I believe in something, I have to put my money behind it. You know what I'm saying? I have to put my money where my mouth is and my belief is. And so I'm the type of person, I try to get all the way in as much as I can with anything I get involved with. And so just whenever I was, assigned a position on a committee, given a chairmanship, vice chairmanship, whatever, I went into the National Association's Leadership Academy. I always tried to do the very best I could do. And I think it was from that people would come to me and say, you're someone, that really shows that you're committed. You're someone who's in, you get it. We'd like for you to consider being in this position. And that's how it happened. It was never, you're my friend, hey, he's down with us. Let's just elevate him without you having some sort of proficiency in whatever you were doing. And so for me, I never experienced that. So I would say that doesn't exist, right?
Sure.
It may exist for some areas, whatever, but it just doesn't exist to the extent that most people think. So that's a misperception.
Sure. And let's give a shout out real quick to the Leadership Academy, class of 2016, Sweet 16. Honestly, man, the Leadership Academy and those opportunities and the things that I learned in that building, it really helped change my whole perception of the industry. And those are some of the best relationships that I have right now. And when I think, okay, I'm going to meet with a client in this area that I may not be as familiar with, these are the people that I call.
Right, and they help you. They're willing to help you. And you're referring to the local Leadership Academy.
Yes.
Which I was in the very first one that they ever
That's
had.
what I know you were.
And I got to be dean of it in 2011, which I thought was incredible.
Sure.
But
and then you were in the
national one. That's where I really think it really took off for me on the national level, because I was in the room with some incredible people.
Yeah.
I mean, these people own their own companies. They were rock stars. And, here, they're saying, oh, I run, 40 offices. I have 500 agents.
Yeah.
And I would say, hey, I'm a realtor. I'm in Raleigh. I got my own business. Yeah, well, I'm with the company. I've been president of my associate. That was it. So I felt like really I was the mouse in the room, but they accepted me.
It's amazing.
I became
it's amazing
a part of it.
to put yourself. I mean, someone who has had the accolades that you've had and had the success that you had, to keep putting yourself in that next level where you are not just being that big fish in a little pond. You challenge yourself and go to that greater level to grow. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about. What are the steps like getting involved? If someone wants to be involved, is it just based on your acumen? Is it based on your merit? Is it based on just being in the room for a long time? Like, what do you think the benefit and the reason people should get more involved in our local associations and even greater into the state and the National Association?
Well, it's like I said, getting engaged helps you to have an impact. You know what I mean? And that's what it's all about. I always, that adage, if you're the smartest in the room, find another room, right? So I always try to find the next room, right? And what I would say to people is get involved. Once you engage, I have a saying that I say around the country that you have to breathe out in order to breathe in, right? But the thing is, just if you physically breathe out at some point, and you won't know it, right? You're going to have to take a breath in, right? You're going to have to breathe in. And so that's how it works. I wanted to be someone that gave, that contributed. So I would come, I get involved, I try to make it a better place, try to contribute in any way I could at the time.
Sure.
I was learning, we were sharing information. And then at some point, unbeknownst to me, it just started to come at me, like the leadership opportunities. I had friends. Whenever I needed to sell something in a community, I knew somebody in that. He's the person in Holly Springs.
Sure.
He's the person in Cary. She's the person in Wake Forest. She's the person in this area in Raleigh, And so I started making friends. They started seeing that I was someone that was serious about it and respected. So I think the benefit of it is to establish those networks, establish yourself as a credible person in the business, someone that's in the business of real estate, and not someone that really just is there caring about the commission check.
No, I think it makes a big difference when you start to think about being in those rooms and the reach that you can have. We are in one of the top relocation areas in the country.
Absolutely.
People are coming here from all over, from coast to coast. And those agents in those different areas, they don't know people all over the country. They only know the people who take the effort to be known,
right,
and to put themselves and show themselves. And when you're in these leadership academies and when you're in these different volunteer opportunities, they know, like you said, that you're serious about your craft and that you're knowledgeable and that you're putting the time and effort in. So when if they've got 40 offices and 500 agents in somewhere else in the world, somebody's going to want to be coming to your area.
Right.
And when that happens, who do they know? Who do they trust?
They'll say you, Asa, Andre. I met Andre at an association event in DC, Chicago, wherever the conferences are held. He's someone who's serious about real estate. He's in the business of real estate. He cares about public policy, our private property rights, our industry. He's involved. He's someone I can trust with my clients that are leaving here and going there. And that's what you want.
That's amazing. I mean, both of those worlds come together. Like you said, you're breathing out and you're sharing and you're making the effort and you're putting the time in, and then just naturally you're going to breathe in, and that starts to come back.
Right.
And those referrals and those deals that come in when they call you up and say, there's no interviewing. There is no interview.
Right.
Help me find. I already found it already. Matter of fact, can you just meet me down here?
No, what they'll say is, you come highly recommended by X, right? This person. And whoever that person is, they have respect for that person. And so they're all of the, do you know what you're doing? Is this person someone that's going to represent me? That kind of is out the window. You already are warm. You already have the in. So that's the thing that's important.
Right. No, that I think people don't understand that, yes, there's a benefit and a growth of your knowledge base, being in these rooms rather, and going through the process of what these decision makers are considering when they make a decision. And I want to take a second to get into our next section that we call a seat at the table.
Seat at the table.
And then today we want to talk about advocacy.
Advocacy.
Which is a word that you may just be a little familiar with as the VP of advocacy for the nation. NAR prides itself in its advocacy arm and its reach and what they do in DC and the way that they're able to advocate for homeowners' rights and for realtors. I want to ask you, what is the main thing that happens inside of those meetings in DC and wherever the conferences that are being held when the doors close and the Roberts rules go into effect? What are some of the things that happen in those meetings that realtors don't necessarily know or understand?
What is being done there as far as public policy, advocacy, is affecting their bottom lines. And, at those meetings, we're doing everything that we can to protect private property rights, our clients, our community, and our industry, right? And so to be there when that's happening, to see public policy being formed, to see our lobbyists lobbying with the senators and the congressmen at the federal level is amazing. Not only at the federal level, but at the local and the state level as well. But since you said NAR, it's at the federal level. Things like protecting the mortgage interest deduction, protecting 1031 like-kind exchanges, the 199 business deduction, right? Right now we're looking at insurance, the GSEs, how that works. We just passed, interestingly enough, we just passed the 21st Century Road to Homes Act, which is affects how our increasing our supply because we have a housing shortage, and so it streamlines how the processes of how things are developed and how homes are built. One of the things we always advocate for is instead of having a sequential process, having a simultaneous process to getting things approved. And so we really worked hard along with a lot of other agencies and with our senators and our congressmen to get that bill passed. It recently just passed the Senate, right? And so, it's now passed the Senate and the House, and now we're going to be affecting supply. Now let's look at how that affects your bottom line. You can't sell what you don't have, right? In order to sell something, you need the inventory, right? And so we're able to increase that supply. People who have no idea what's being done in those rooms and in those boardrooms, in those rooms with the senators and the congressmen, they don't realize how that's giving them inventory so that they can sell wherever they are in their local areas.
And that's the thing. A lot of us realtors benefit from the work that is being done in those rooms, but we may not necessarily understand or take the time to get involved. And that's one thing that I've been focused on here on From the Peak. We want to make sure that we are giving the information and sparking that curiosity to get more people involved. It makes such a difference when we can have that representation. Some of our greatest institutions in this country have understood that we are greater when we have opinions from different communities in the room when we're making decisions.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's what we want. And I want to understand, how can we do a better job of motivating that next generation to get involved and to be a part of their local community, their local municipality, as well as just, the larger elections that seem to be, pushed out and advertised more. How do we do a better job of getting people more involved?
I think it's just showing them how it affects their bottom line, how it affects the community where they live and serve. And I'll give you another example. And this has been some time ago now, but COVID. When COVID came, everything shut down. You remember, right?
Of course.
We were shut down during COVID. We had 26,000 transactions in the pipeline across the state of North Carolina. So that's 52,000 sides. And that's someone who's living out of their truck, in between, staying with relatives. They may have a home to sell that they've already packed up and they're trying to move. It all stopped. And so our lobbying team at the state level got together and, we got together with the governor and said, look, he's like, what should we do here? He was caught between a rock and a hard place.
Sure.
He didn't want to cut business, but then he didn't want to expose people to this deadly disease, right? this pandemic, right? We got together with them. We said, look, what happens? You got these people, that are pretty much in limbo. And what happens come election time if you leave them in limbo? This is an essential service, right? And he agreed. Of course, he allowed the counties to decide, right? And so, we had some counties that they had to work through it in order to do it, but most of the counties made it an essential service. That's lobbying. That's advocacy at its finest right there. And so during a time where we thought everything was going to be shut down, we were able to still conduct business, help families, help homeowners, and also help ourselves, right? We were able to
keep the lights
keep
on.
the
My
lights
goodness,
on,
it was serious.
Right. So that's an example of how what we do at the state level, right, advocacy-wise, affected our members' bottom line. So when you go and talk to somebody about that, they're going to say, man, I see that's something I need to get involved with. Now, everybody, it's not for everybody. Let's get right. But most people will not.
We don't want everybody representing us,
right? But most people won't argue with you.
Sure.
They'll say, I see what you're saying there.
So let me ask you. I don't mean to cut you off, but this is super important, right? Because when you're in those rooms with those lawmakers, right, the people who are going to have that final decision, and you're lobbying, and you are trying to put your best pitch to keep your industry alive during tough times or to make things better for homeowners.
Right.
What are those arguments that actually move the needle with lawmakers? A lot of times we talk about the public and whether, there may be some outrage to something or there may be some protest or whatever. What are those things that actually move the needle with lawmakers in those meetings?
I think when you tell them how it affects the communities that they represent, because remember, they're elected by their communities, right?
Sure.
Whether it's their district, their area that they're representing in their elected office. Once you tie it back to that, then it kind of helps them see this is something that I'm going to have to move on. And and housing is one of the number one, industries in the country, right? And so they understand that it's important. And, you have to form the relationships before you need them. Like I can't, and this is the thing why you have to continually do it, right? You have to nurture those relationships. You have to build enduring relationships, just like in the business of real estate. So, I wonder what would happen if we never had these relationships. Something happens that affects our business, right? Our communities, right?
Exactly.
Our homeowners. And then we just go up there and hey, and I mean, I wonder how successful we would be. We probably would still get some things done, but not to the extent that we've been able to do over these years. And so I'm a person that believes in advocacy. I think advocacy is what we do as realtors, as real estate people, right? If you don't advocate for your clients, if you don't advocate for your community, then that's failure in the business.
What kind of stuff, would agents miss immediately if the advocacy stopped, if we didn't have people that were out there every day fighting for our rights? What are some of the things that you could think about that might stop and affect people immediately if the advocate wasn't around?
Oh man, things we've saved, like I said, the business, I said earlier, the mortgage interest deduction, that would probably go away. Right now we're lobbying, we're trying to get them to increase the capital gains exemption, right? From $500,000 to, if you live in a home for 2 years and it's your primary residence, you get a $500,000 exemption if you're a couple, right? If you're a married couple, and $250,000 if you're single. We're trying to get that to, $500,000 for single and $1 million as a couple, because that would release some of the inventory that's kind of pent up right now. People that have the 3% interest rates and all that, that would get them to release that. Say, you know what, I'm not going to move if I have a 3% interest rates and rates are at like 7-8%. But if you give them more of a tax exemption, it incentivizes them to say, you know what, I can go ahead and move. I'm not going to get killed on the taxes. And there's been in some areas around the country, especially here in this area, an incredible amount of appreciation. So that's something right there that you would feel immediately. So let's say we were able to do that, right? Just give you an example. Now you release a lot more inventory and what happens to the local realtors in that area? They have more inventory.
More homes to sell.
So that's just one example.
That is amazing. So it's just amazing how sometimes we can be short-sighted
Right.
and not understand how one thing impacts another
Right.
in the industry and in all industries. And that's why it takes these conversations and you taking some time to share this information, because the way we digest content and information is changing, and everybody doesn't watch the news. And so sometimes this is where people are going to hear it, and hopefully this sparks something inside someone that'll help them. Come on, get to your local association, go on and knock on that door, walk in there, go to the meetings, see where you can get in.
Right.
Trust me, somebody's going to you're going to be voluntold to do something.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, there's so much out there, and we need these different opinions. We need you. We need your opinion. We need your experience to help us make better decisions to affect our livelihood.
The diversity of that, the many different perspectives. I agree with you 100%. That is vital. I mean, I used to always say, imagine if they were, let's say there are about 10,000 people at the Raleigh Association. I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but
Sure.
let's say there were 10,000 Aces or 10,000 Andres. I mean, what would we wouldn't really get anything. It'd be all monotone. So it's the differences of opinions that make us the great association that we are. Different aspects, people that can come with whatever proficiencies they have, whatever education they have, experience. We are stronger together. We get better together, and we can keep ourselves a strong industry and a strong community.
Certainly. And let me ask you this. How much of that did you learn in Washington? Like being in Washington and being in these different, seeing people like our senators and to the highest extent of our government, and seeing and hearing those conversations and how has that impacted your opinion of what's going on now?
Oh, it's been very educational. I'm a political science major at NC State, right?
Okay.
So I kind of knew, I was someone.
So this is definitely your thing.
Right? But for someone that's not, you get to see firsthand how that sausage is made. You get to see how that works, how we go in before a senator or a congressman or woman, right, and say, hey, this is what we need and this is why. And then you talk with their staffers, and let's say that there's a bill that probably needs a couple more votes. We may have a realtor who has a relationship with that particular congressman or that senator, right? And so what they're able to do is move the needle. That person has been a holdout because of the relationship that realtor has with them. They're able to explain why it's important and vital that this bill gets passed. And they're able to get that person's ear. And then, of course, they move the needle. They get that vote. The bill gets passed.
That one or two votes helps that bill gets passed.
And then now we're all benefiting.
Wow.
Right.
Wow. So it's huge. Yeah, the lobbying, when I was in D.C., when I was serving on our board, and I got to, go through those halls and go in some of those rooms, 30-foot ceilings and the
Very
columns.
impressive.
And it's just, on television, it looks one way.
Right.
But when you walk in there and you sit at this table and who else sat at this table?
Right.
Who? And you're looking up there and the people are speaking. You're saying, you're just a couple feet away from that podium. You might just be a short time away from speaking yourself. Like someone like yourself, understanding that this wasn't always the plan.
It was not. If you would have told me that I would be the vice president of advocacy for the National Association of Realtors when I first got into real estate in New York, I would have laughed at you like, there's no way. So it's been an incredible ride. I am extremely fortunate, and I don't take that lightly. And it's like you were saying earlier, I try to help as many people as I can. If they call me, I say, this is what you want to do. Now, it is a balancing act, right? You still have to, I'm still a practicing realtor.
Of course.
And, the balance is difficult. Sometimes you get out of balance, or you're like, I need some more sales.
Certainly.
I'm putting too much time into this, but you're able to learn how to balance it where you can survive, and the benefit really outweighs any type of imbalance that you may encounter along the way.
Sure, it makes a big difference, and I know it's
That's just being real.
No, it's not an easy job either. You know what I mean? I mean, at the end of the day, yes, it's going to be taking up time. It's going to be taking energy,
Right.
right? You got to put that real effort in. But also, we talked about some of the returns that you get, right?
Right.
But it's not just sunshine in those meetings all the time.
Right.
As an industry, we have had to face some tough conversations. Even more recently, we've had some tough issues
Absolutely.
that have been brought up. And so our body that we look to for advice, NAR, has represented us in one of the biggest changes in real estate in the modern era recently, in this huge lawsuit over commissions and who pays what.
Right.
So help me to understand. Throughout this process, some people have been pro, some people have been against. Where do you think NAR has done well in this settlement process? What do you think that they have gotten right?
Well, it's there's a lot of things, right, that we've gotten right. And I think, when you look at the lawsuits, that talked about buyer representation and the MLS, where we had the commission in the MLS, that we got caught with our pants down. We had 37 states that had buyer representation. They had a buyer's agency agreement. They told the seller, what they were going to be paying a buyer's agent, right?
We were one of those 37 states.
We were one of the
had all that.
pioneers. We were one of the pioneers. We
Other
did it in
people
the
didn't have
90s.
that?
There were 37 states that did not, right?
30. Hold on. There were 37 states that did have buyer agency.
That did not
have
Right,
buyer's
right,
agency
right,
agreements.
right.
Wow.
So you had, that's transformative. If you
Sure.
only have about 13 states, that are doing it. And so, there were some states and where the class action lawsuit, Sitzer Burnett case was brought in Missouri, right? They didn't have buyer agency like that. So, they weren't telling the seller that, hey, I'm paying the buyer's agent this. So what that, sort of translated into for that seller is that I overpaid. Right. And so, we lost that. We thought we were on the right side. We thought we were being as transparent as we can. We're telling all the parties this in the MLS, this is what this person is going to get paid. Yeah, we knew it, right? But some of the sellers didn't know across the country. And so, upwards of over $5 billion when you look at treble damages we were responsible for, right? We settled for 400 and I think 80 something $million. When we did that, we were protecting, about 1 million of our members, right? Anyone who didn't have over $2 billion in sales, right, in volume. And so, I think we saved roughly 1 million people. And they can't be sued. They're protected under the settlement. I think that's something that we did right. I think now what we're doing is we're learning from our mistakes and what we did in the past. And we're now, we've got a new CEO, Nakia Wright, and she's done an incredible comprehensive risk assessment where we're going to, work on that never happening again. We have to always look at how the industry is forming, how it's shaping. Right now we have the Batten case and the buyer's, representation case that's going on that we're currently litigating. But, I think what we got right was we did what we could at the time to protect as many members that we could. And of course, those members that were above 2 billion in sales, they weren't too happy, right?
Sure.
It's understandable. But, the people that were in that room at that time did the best that they could do at that time, to protect as many members as they could.
So what might the public be getting wrong after this lawsuit and after everything has transpired? What might be wrong out there that people are not necessarily understanding or seeing?
Well, I think the misperception that's out there now is that, realtors are disingenuous when it comes to charging for their services. People think that, they just sold the house, right? And as well as I know, that there's way more that goes into getting that house sold, right? Than just putting it on the market.
Putting that sign in the yard,
sign in
right?
the yard and the lockbox on the door. And I think the public at large, sort of doesn't understand what it took for you, or any other realtor, to get to the point where we're able to do that in the most stressless way, right? That we can do.
You're not paying for the 30 days that it takes to get this process, because you're paying for the 10 years that it took for me to learn how to do
transactions where you might have learned
all those meetings,
right? Meetings, trainings, right? And so I think the misperception when they put it out that, housing prices were high because, the realtors are charging too much. I think that was something that was a misperception that came from the lawsuits, and that we're working very hard through our consumer ad campaigns and things like that to change the narrative where we're not looked as if we're just greedy salespeople.
Sure. Right. No, I think that's important. And I do always appreciate when I see the commercials and some of the slots and some of the locations, and there's something out there that's just, putting some positive information out there about us. I do appreciate that.
Absolutely.
That goes a long way, because sometimes over here on this side, we don't always know what's going on at NAR. Maybe we haven't taken the time to investigate and to research, or even just read the information that's in our inboxes already. Right. Sometimes we don't always know exactly what's going on at NAR. And only thing we know is, my dues are about to come up. What are you doing with my dues, right? That's what all the agents, they say, well, tell me where my dues are going to, right. And so I get that part, right? But let me ask you, in the process of all this that's going on, and as we are being more transparent as agents, we're being more transparent with the public, we're being more transparent with our own membership. When I talk to other agents, the growing conversation is around, well, we are staying members of NAR because we want to have access to our local MLS, and we want to have access to those forms that have been created through painstaking conversation and meetings and things like that. What I would say is, what other things is NAR doing to help incentivize the agents in membership and being members of NAR? What other kind of things are being included or being made widely aware to agents that NAR is doing to benefit for that money and the effort and the time that we put in being a member?
Well, I'm going to always say, as the vice president of advocacy is key. If we are not at the table, you hear that saying, right? You're on the menu, right? And so you benefit. For me, I'd pay my dues just to know that there's people out there advocating. I mean, I'll give you an example. How many times have you seen a candidate on the TV when they're running for office and they come and they say what they're going to do, and then you vote for them? How many of us really follow to make sure that they're doing what they say they're going to do? Mm-hmm. We have a team, an advocacy team of professionals that are involved, that goes out and makes sure that if they said they were going to vote for this bill, we monitor them and make sure, we quality assure that. We make sure, hey, and if they don't do what they say, we don't support them anymore, right? And so it's difficult. We're one of the largest lobbying groups in the country, if not the largest. And so that right there, it's worth being a member. Well, we also we're done a new strategic plan, right? We're going to keep members abreast of things that we're doing and accomplishing with our strategic plan. We have words in there like thrive, protect, educate. We just want these type of things to let them know this is what we're doing to make sure that we have a very good value proposition for that member to be a member of NAR. We're stronger together. Certainly. Right? And some people have come to me when I go around the country and they say, we can do all that here locally. Well, we know that this is the United States is many nations. If there are many states in the union, there's many nations. I mean, it's different here than it is in California. It's different in New York than it is here, be honest.
Sure.
And so we need to sometimes, collaborate, have an overarching, effort in affecting federal and public policy. And so we can have an overarching policy that protects us all, right? We attack things like insurance. I mean, if you're on the coast, insurance affects you anyway.
Yeah.
Tornadoes
It's huge.
just happened last week, the tornadoes. These are things that we try to make sure that we're advocating for, to make sure the homeowners are protected when it comes to these things. And so it's so much better to sit in front of a client and say, I belong to the National Association of Realtors, where we advocate for private property rights, right? And we make sure that we are advocating for you, a homeowner, than to say, if the homeowner is, let's say the homeowner is, knowledgeable about that stuff and you're not. Do you get that business? I don't think you do.
No, you
and
don't
I
have
can
it.
tell you right now, I've had so many clients that have told me if I'm, competing for a listing, they'll say, man, nobody comes in here and talks the way you do. I mean, you know about what's going on in the area, the planning, what's the nearest trends, what's coming, about the laws, the advocacy, the policies. Is it okay? My cousin is a realtor. We kind of have to use that, but can we still contact you to find out about these things? And I'll say absolutely, right? But I can't help you with any transaction if you're going to use them, obviously, right?
Of course.
But I don't have a problem sharing information on what's happening in the area. So I'm automatically respected. And I would think that anyone that's a member of the National Association of Realtors and they can say they're a member, if they're paying their dues, they will look just the same. Like, hey, I'm involved. I know what's going on, and I'm trying to protect you as a homeowner, not just get your money for the transaction that we're doing right now.
That is huge. That is huge, because when you start to think about what is the goal of all of this, what is the point, is to put a system in place where people are able to transfer these properties, right? And someone there to govern it.
Right.
And so when you start to talk about what return you get from being at your local board, from being at your local municipality and being in the council meetings and all of these things, the knowledge and the awareness
Right.
to be able to speak differently from those that don't have that knowledge and awareness, to be able to differentiate yourself. What makes you a different, because you sold 20, he sold 30.
Right.
It's not really, my cousin might have to come over the top of all of that, but but at the end of the day, I know that this person is a professional.
Right.
This person is aware and knowledgeable, and I have ultimate confidence in choosing them to represent me.
Right.
That makes a huge difference.
It does.
It goes along.
And there's a lot of other things, I'm not going to talk about, but education, ethics, the professional standards. I mean, that's something where you hold each other accountable, for being professional, because at the end of the day, this is a profession. I know we say industry, right, but it's a profession, and you have to be the ultimate and the utmost professional when dealing with these clients and homeowners.
I agree so much. And that leads me really into our next segment that I wanted to talk to you about. We call this the summit. All right. So we're here from the peak, and this is the summit.
Okay.
All right. So this is where we get up and we have that greater view of what it is that is coming.
Right.
And this is what we talk about in this segment. So as things become more visible to us, and we start to talk about NAR and how, in a more overall, overarching responsibility to our population here, and how NAR has been involved in a central way to the widening wealth gap between populations in our country, right? We've had over the years some tough times in this country dealing with issues like redlining, gerrymandering, restrictive covenants that are baked into the community that say that certain people are not allowed to be in this area, and how those things impact the very fabric of our communities and the future impact on certain groups in our country, right? You're a black man. I'm a black man in this country, and we have experienced a lot of conversation about the effects of redlining and gerrymandering and things like that. A lot of the discriminatory mortgage practices out there and all those kind of different things. When you talk about real estate being a profession, right? Of course, and real estate being a business, but some people hide behind that real estate is just a business and don't necessarily talk about how real estate impacts civil rights in our country. Can you speak to the role that we have as realtors, as black professionals in this real estate industry to help overcome some of these practices that we've had? I know you being in your position with NAR has spoken openly about believing that some of these practices have contributed to the difference in the wealth gap.
Absolutely.
You know, they've made that known. I'm not, putting what they spoken those words.
Right.
How do we not make real estate just a dollars and cents industry and focus on the civil rights aspect of what we do? How do we keep that at the forefront?
Looking back, when you had, federal, housing administration, it formed in 1934, late 1933, 34, can't remember exactly right now. And then you had the Fair Housing Act, right, in 1968. And then, of course, NAR, celebrated, the 50 year back in 2018. And what we've been trying to do is really keep it about your community. It's all about homogeneous, non-discriminatory communities. And we've always been against redlining, steering, and all of the above, right? And so what we have to do is stay committed to that. We have to make sure that we get as many people that look like you and me involved to make sure that we are holding them accountable to do that. And, I can say I've been involved, 25 years now. If I say I never experienced discrimination in real estate, right, that would be not true, right?
Sure.
It exists. It exists in a lot of other industries. But as an association, as NAR, Advocacy, we've always advocated for, our communities and our realtors to not be discriminatory. We've always advocated for fair housing, right? We want to make sure that we are here because it's the law,
Sure.
right? And that's something that we have to stay committed to. And we can't stay committed to it if you're not involved, right?
We need people involved.
We need people that look like you and me involved.
What does that housing advocacy look like in 2026 and not 1968?
Well, things like, low income tax credits, opportunity zones. This is how we're lobbying for these things. They're now something that we can do, right? We can build missing middle housing. We can build affordable housing, right? Because of these LIHTC funds, right? That to me is a huge part of it. Things locally, you could say down payment assistance. I've been in it long enough, and I know you have, where you've seen down payment assistance really start to build wealth for families. Like they're able to get into that house with down payment assistance. They stay in that house for 7 to 10 years, right? And then they move up to a larger house, and they're building equity. They're building wealth.
Sure.
It's generational wealth. It's a way to break intergenerational poverty, right? And so I always say, the business is different. This is something I always say. The business is different for you and me, right? There's I'll say two sets of ideologies, right? Mm-hmm. One is you get into your home, you stay 7 to 10 years, you buy your starter home, you take that equity, you move up because now schools are important. Your kids are probably in first grade. You do it again in another 7 to 10 years because they're going into high school. You do it again, another 7 to 10 years. And then once they're in college, you become empty nester, you sell that home, right? And you move to
Forever
like
situation.
a town home or something, that's not as much space, right? And you take that money and you help your kids, right? Then there's another ideology, right, where let's just be honest, you buy one house. You stay in that house for 30 some odd plus years. You take seconds, thirds out just to try to send your kids to college and pay your bills. And then you die, the kids don't live there now. It's where they grew up. It's old, right? They now have Nest thermostats and sliding floors and, automatic shades and all that, right? And so they sell your home for cheap to some investor, right? And then, no one makes any money. They don't build wealth with it. And so just the education of it that you and I can bring, right, can help try to level that playing field to them just so that they know that this is what it is like to build generational wealth by just living in your homes.
The knowledge is so important. The education is really, we know as we get older, we can just think about how ridiculous some of the things we thought when we were younger, just in general.
Right.
And so being in this industry for 15 years, and I can remember times when I thought some dumb things in the industry when I was younger in my days of real estate. And so the knowledge and the information that you're offering is huge, and I wonder, what is it going to take to get more Black professionals from just working in the industry? NAR has done a good job. We're fighting the discrimination for our homeowners. We're fighting discrimination in our realtors, that they have to behave accordingly and with the code of ethics and things of that nature. What is it going to take now to get our Black professionals that are in the industry to move from just working in the industry to actually benefiting more as owners?
What I try to do is really get them to move beyond the commission check, the income. And I was guilty of it. Maybe you were as well.
Of course.
When I first got into real estate in New York, I wanted, like I told you, I was an entrepreneur. I wanted to kill my own food. I got into the business to make, $1 million a month. I thought I was going to be rich. I was going to give all my family, the houses. And I think it was about a month into it where I realized I might not make $1 million my entire career.
Sure.
This is hard. But, you got to get past the monetary aspect of it and look at it as leaving a legacy, building a community, and helping as many people as you can build generational wealth through housing. And you can do it just by living, like I just said, by not buying your dream home first, buying a starter home, and kind of moving up throughout your lifetime. And then as far as getting involved, and helping, it's the more people that are involved, the more change that you can, impact. And to me, it's all about impacting change for the better for all of us, and I think we all benefit when we don't have redlining, when we don't have steering, when we don't have appraisal issues and all this stuff that we're experiencing. And the only way that we can make sure that we're moving the needle on this is to have as many as us involved to make sure that we're holding people accountable and making sure we're making the best decisions in that regard.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So whose responsibility is it then? I mean, is it you and I? Is it the general public's responsibility? Or is it NAR's responsibility to make sure that we have that representation, that diverse representation, and we have more of our leaders that are actually involved in seeing the returns in the industry and not just being the doorkeepers?
I think it's up to all of us. It's all of us. I mean, if I'm telling you and I are telling our fellow realtors, get involved, right? If you're a consumer, right, and you're going, I only want to do business with people I know are looking at this as a profession, maybe not my cousin or mother, aunt, who I know does 1 or 2 transactions a year and is not, I mean, not that there's nothing wrong with doing it. That's a path, right? And I always say nobody's path is a straight line, right?
Sure.
But, we can hold people accountable to say, this is a profession. I only want to work with a professional, right? And we have longevity in our profession. We have longevity profession. We have everybody keeping each other accountable. I'm only going to work with people who, are involved with the business, right? And not just here for the check, right? And then, you say the public at large, our municipalities, our political aspect of it, they need to adhere to that as well and say, hey, we're going to make sure that we keep this as level of a playing field that we can. And if we have everyone committed to that, then it will happen.
I love that. I think you're 100% right in having all the oars rowing in the same direction is going to help us. And I think we've we made huge strides in that regard.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, think about it. So just to give you context, when you look at Raleigh Regional, when I first got there in 2001, there was like maybe 1 or 2 people on the board that were of color.
Wow.
Let's be honest. I replaced one person that was of color on the board. So It was just me and another person of color. And, I remember, looking at it in 2018, 19 or so when I was president of NC Realtors, looking back at Raleigh Regional, it had come so far. I mean, I think there were like maybe 5, 6 people on the board.
No,
and
it's
then into
definitely
the 20s, it was maybe 6, 7 people of color on the board. So I think we are moving the needle. We're getting the respect. Obviously, that has to do with whatever area you're in, right? Because if you don't have that diversity, right, in that area, it's not going to happen, right? Sure. But, that I think the involvement has to mimic and mirror what the community, what the community makeup is. And as long as you see that moving in the right direction, then we're doing the right thing.
That's all you can really ask for.
That's all you can
keep going
for.
forward.
Keep going forward.
All right. Well, look, we've gotten to the point of this show where this is our final point. We call this a little off the top.
Okay.
All right. So this is our little rapid fire segment where we throw a couple things out at you, and I want you to just give me your first thoughts right off the top of your head. We're in the barbershop. This is casual. Nobody's gonna listen to this. No one's gonna hear it.
You got it.
But you give me right off the top. All right.
Stays in the barbershop.
Stays in the barbershop. Right. Exactly. Okay. Is BlackRock the villain, or is that just lazy?
I think that's just lazy. I always approach this business that there's enough for all of us. And, what's meant for me, nobody else can take.
I hear that. Why do local elections matter more to housing than national elections?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind there is everything is local. I mean, if you talk about real estate, what do they say are the 3 most important things in real estate? Location, location, location. So if location is where it is, then your local, municipalities and your county governments are important. And of course, when it comes to community growth and community policies, that's all done by the local pretty much. And, they're really not willing to give up that local control.
Sure.
Some states, I think, I am now learning, some states have state preemption when it comes to, development and things like that. But, local. So
Yeah.
I think it's local control. That's where it happens. And, location.
So everything is local.
Everything is
local. Right. That makes, I love that. I'm gonna steal that one. Write that down. Okay. So tell me this then. Okay. Boom. What's the real reason agents are so mad at NAR?
I just think they're unaware. It's like anything. If you're not aware of what's happening, then you form your own opinion of what's happening, right? And then you go with it. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you, and I know you can agree, people that had no clue, right? And they had one thing, like, all I need NAR for is access to MLS, until they get involved. Once they engage and they see what's happening at the NAR conferences, the NAR conferences, the legislative meetings, and they go out there and see what's happening, it blows their mind. And we have a saying, people that are involved at leadership level, if you could get them to one conference or one meeting, they're pretty much hooked for life.
That is
And
so
then the
true.
people that aren't engaged, right, they start telling you, you're drinking the Kool-Aid, and all that. But no, I've actually raised my awareness of what this association is actually doing for homeowners, right, for private property rights in our industry, in our profession, right, that I now know and I feel a sense of duty to stay involved.
With that being said, and what NAR is doing to fight and for private home rights in the face of this looming idea that someone's going to buy up all the homes in the world and no one's going to have any left. What would you say to quell some of the concerns that people have that normal individuals will not be able to buy a home in 20 years?
I don't have that crystal ball to see what will happen in 20 years, but what I can say is what's happening in the present moment, right? You know what they say, you only can look at the past in the present, you only can look at the future in the present. And I know right now we're advocating to make sure that whoever has the ability and wants to buy a home will have access to actually buying a home. And, that bill that just passed really is aimed at decreasing the shortage, right, and increasing the supply so that more people have access to housing. We've always fought for more access to, credit, things like this. And as long as we are at the table, right, and we're advocating, I think we're less likely, right, to end up on the menu where no one's going to be able to own a home.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Few people own a home.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
We're there at the table.
Just knowing that somebody's got their eye on it,
right,
and that somebody's
we're
watching
monitoring
it.
Right, and fighting for it. Right.
Exactly. And there's funds available to push that fight to wherever it needs to go. And it is a collective effort. It is not just individuals pointing every which way. Right. We put it all together to form the big fist and try and do some damage when we go into DC with our lobbyists and try to get what we want to get accomplished.
And we're the largest lobbying group in the country. And the only one that fights for home ownership. Now you got to remember who elects these people to Congress?
The public.
The public. So, they're going to not do anything, right? Hopefully, right? We think if we are there advocating, they're not going to do anything that affects their community back at home. It's local.
Gotcha. So we're there advocating and we're speaking on behalf of the residents and the homeowners in the areas that elect the individuals and put them in the spot. So we want to make sure we got somebody there reminding them that these are the people who elected you and this is what these people need.
You said that you were going to advocate for more supply when you were running for office. We have a team that keeps abreast of that. I always tell that to people. I said it earlier. You hear one soundbite from a candidate, right? And you go, I align with that person. And so
every vote,
I'm just being honest. The average person,
you're not paying attention. You don't know everything they did. Sure,
but we have people that are paying attention when it comes to private property rights, home ownership, and our industry. And so we're going to keep them accountable. And I think as long as we do that and we're at the table, we won't end up on that menu. We won't get eaten.
I hear that. So let me wrap this whole thing up and ask you. You spoke about this earlier, and I think it is a huge thing. I want you to talk about it again.
Sure.
Just for that young Black realtor, developer, investor who is of the mindset that these rooms weren't set up with me in mind, and these rooms are not where I'm going to be able to get anything done. They already are set up in a way that is going to keep me out of it. Nothing I say is going to matter. My vote, my hand raised doesn't matter. What do you say to explain to them how you unlearned that thought process?
Well, I would say I never had that thought process, right? And the fact that I was able to get involved, be in those rooms, right? Which I never planned. I never had a goal of doing. Like I said earlier, I only did what I was asked. I'm living proof. I tell people, if someone like me, right, can be in these rooms, you can too, because there's nothing, extraordinary about myself. There's nothing that sets me apart from, a lot of other people. I'm a practicing realtor like anyone else. I am not a billionaire, multimillionaire, right? I'm not one of those people. And so if it was just for those types of people, and I'm not even really the closest friends of a lot of the people that are in the room. I'm just someone that is in the room, and I got there by contributing, by, like I said, breathing out before I breathed in.
Wow.
And, I gave and gave and gave. I gave from my pockets. I am a Hall of Fame RPAC investor, right? I committed all of my resources that I could to showing that I was committed to this industry and this profession and home ownership, private property rights. And I think the fact that I did that really encouraged people to say, hey, this guy belongs,
Sure.
right?
What do they need to unlearn in order to rise?
I would remove any type of perception that there are barriers. What is it? What you see is what you'll be. And so if you see
Yeah,
that
if you see it, you can
right,
be it.
right,
Yeah.
if you see that you can be in that room, you'll be in that room. If you don't see it, and if you keep that mindset as I can't. We use my mother and father, God bless their souls, right? Rest in peace. They used to say, you can get to a I will from a I can. But it's very difficult to get to a I will from a I can't.
Mm.
And so if you say I can't get in those rooms, it's not for me. They're keeping me out. That materializes as your reality. But if you say, like they say, there's a will, there's a way. I want to be involved. I want to be at the table. I want to be able to help with the decision making, be involved with the decision making. Then that's going to become your reality. And I truly have lived it. I can't talk for other people, right? I'm sure there's someone that said, I tried to get in it, and I couldn't.
Sure.
Well, maybe, there's something that set the people noticed that it wasn't genuine. There's so myriad of things I could say maybes, right? But at least for my experience, anyone that I saw that was genuinely committed, right, to improving the lives of the clients, the homeowners, protecting private property rights in our industry, they were allowed to be in the rooms and at that table. It's very few people. You do see people that come in, they're one-trick ponies, they have one agenda that hey, we need to be doing this and nothing else matters but that. Yeah, maybe they're not as successful. Sometimes they are. Because sometimes they raise the
Take that,
awareness
yeah, sure.
of the people who's in the room, right? And they go, oh God, that's a point we haven't never thought of. And then they're like, that's good. But if it's someone that's disingenuous, they only want to benefit themselves or whatever man, you're not going to be as successful. But if you're genuinely there to, contribute to the betterment, I've never seen anyone restricted from doing that.
Man, well, I'll tell you, I, for one, feel better knowing that we have somebody like you up in those rooms, up in NAR. There's so many, the awareness, like you said, of what's happening in that organization. And then you start to talk about our new president and some of the people, Kevin and all the individuals that line from local to state to national that are putting their time and effort in there.
Incredible people.
Amazing people.
Amazing people.
I feel really good knowing that I have people out there representing me and that are focused on some of those things so I can just do what I do. Some of my steps can be ordered.
Can I say this?
Please.
I challenge realtors to get engaged, get involved. I challenge you to make the effort. I absolutely challenge you to do it and then say that it isn't so. I think if you make an effort to get in where you have a proficiency or where you have an interest or an affinity, you're going to be someone that helps move the needle in that regard and move the needle for all of us. I've not really seen, is very rare. I mean, I can probably count on one hand people that came in, that weren't successful, and it's usually because of something that, they did, that kind of outed their true motivation, right?
Sure.
But for the most part, if you make an effort to get involved and help, you're accepted and able to I guess have that impact.
Make a living for yourself, and being in those rooms can help the opportunity for us all to make a living for ourselves. So,
Right.
So we thank you. We thank you very
And
much.
I'll say one more thing. I told you I was a Hall of Fame RPAC investor. Right?
That's right.
When some people say, well, you gave all that money, where are you getting that money from? And all, and I go, I took it as a duty. Right? I tell you, I get involved. I get all the way in. Like I'm going to show you. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. And when I made the decision to do that, and I say this around the country, I knew that I was paying the fair share of $15, right, for 800 realtors when I made that check, right, who had no clue of how it would benefit them. And you think I'm the only one? There's a lot of major investors at many levels that are paying for that, right? I mean, you'd be surprised how many major investors are moving the needle for people that don't even give a dime.
Yeah.
But yet they are benefiting from the efforts of those major investors. And so if you're not able, for whatever reason, to engage at the level and be involved with those rooms and take those trips, at least invest in RPAC, right? If you're a realtor, invest in RPAC and help us move the needle at the state, the local, the state, and the national level, so that we all are helping each other. Because what you can't do and what you can't show up at, you can absolutely help with your dollar.
You can still support. You
Absolutely,
can still be a part
support.
of it.
Right.
Awesome. And we need the support. We need the support because we need y'all up there, because I'm not going anymore. I'm not going back. So we need y'all up there. Support RPAC. Go ahead online and support RPAC. I support like crazy. I can't wait till I get the big pen. I'm gonna get the big pen soon. So I do have one question that I want to ask. This is my hot button question.
Okay.
All right. We are seeing lots of changes in our industry. We're seeing many different players get involved. There's lots of money coming in. There's always been understanding that real estate has been a steady investment from day one. But we're seeing people that are changing the game. And as NAR, you guys are the ones that are out there and keeping an eye on what's happening, not only in the local place, but across the country. I wanted to ask you about what's happening with brokerages like Compass, who is purchasing other brokerages and growing and, having mortgage companies and whatever. And they're making this, seamless loop to where they are utilizing office exclusives as a way to almost build their own inventory, like a separate MLS. And as they grow and have more control of more transactions, the concern that I hear is, are we going to enter an area where there's already individual MLSs that are operating standalone, and now we've got organizations that have their inventory and they're using them as office exclusives, and they're almost weaponizing that exclusive to say that if you are not a member of this company, then you don't have access to these homes, and how that impacts the market and sellers where their home doesn't hit the open market. How, if any, talks have been had about this, what seems to be new to me, about the usage of the office exclusive? Are there any talks about that going on?
I mean, there's been some. I mean, when it comes to any brokerage, right? We encourage innovation. NAR, we know that there are many different business models, and as long as it doesn't become antitrust, we have no problem with it. Of course, we do advocate for clear cooperation, right? And that's just being, as transparent as we can with the actual consumer. So where we would be concerned would be as if the consumer doesn't have access to it, right? But as far as different business models and what businesses are doing to be innovative and increase market share, we welcome that. I mean, that's a fair that's a enterprise, that's fair enterprise, free enterprise. That's an open market, and we were not against that. But what we are for is clear cooperation and just to make sure that the consumer has access to the information. Where you run afoul is if, let's say, a certain segment of the consumer is being left out, right? That's where we start to get concerned as NAR, right? But as far as people trying to, increase their market share, acquire different companies and things like that, that's open market, and that's doing business.
As long as they're playing by the rules, NAR doesn't get involved.
Right, we don't get involved in that at all. Right.
Awesome thing. I appreciate you answering that because it is a concern, and it's something that has been talked about. And me personally, I feel like you. I said, well, hell, they might be on to something there. Right. Well, what are you gonna do, right? You don't know what things change all the time.
Think about it now. The innovation that you see today is because of the times. You had innovation in history. You had the various brokerages that became very, very large, in the early, times of real estate. Back in the 70s, 80s, there were a group. Then in the 80s, you had, brokerages that came up and they became the brokerage, right? They did some innovative things. They gobbled up a lot of little small mom and pops. But even though they did that, there's still a lot of mom and pops in the industry.
Sure.
So, everybody has their different business models, right? We don't care, I think, what you choose to do, how you choose to grow your business, as long as it doesn't break the law. It doesn't become an antitrust situation, and you're not keeping inventory from the consumer. Because it's really about being fair and equitable to the consumer. And some people are like, look, I don't want anybody to know. I'm Michael Jordan. I want you to know I live here and I'm selling. I don't want that. I want everybody in my house.
Sure.
They have a right to do that, right? There's some people that's their business model. That's what they go after. Professional athletes, right? So there's many different models out there, right? But if somebody wants to see that house is on the market, they should have the ability to see that, because you never know who has the ability to purchase it. And you want to give everybody the equal access to whatever is on the market.
That makes total sense. I agree with that. We thank you so much for coming, spending some time.
Thank you for having me. This has been awesome.
This means so much, man. I think
good to see you doing this.
Oh man, these guys, they got me out here, man. There's no better place I'd rather be. I think if they got somebody they want to run their mouth for a little bit, they got the right guy. Man. Okay. But thank you, Asa, man.
Yeah,
I
man.
appreciate
Always. Yeah. Thank you.